Welcome back to another solo episode, another boardroom briefing. Today, we're going to be talking about something that most owners never actually realize is happening until it's too late and already underway. And that is, how do banks quietly lose confidence in your growing business? Now, many residential service owners assume that if revenue is increasing, number of trucks on the road is increasing, we're busy, the board's jamming, that their banking relationship must automatically be getting stronger. Like, oh, look at all the revenue we're doing, and look at all the money we're flowing through this bank. They must love us. However, that's usually not the case. Banks evaluate businesses very differently than owners do because banks remove the emotion and they strictly look at the financial health of the company. Owners are going to see the effort. They're going to see the sleepless nights. They're going to feel the effort. They're going to feel the sleepless nights. They're going to see the revenue and wow, we keep growing, and their service titan keeps showing month over month growth of revenue. And they feel like there is momentum. However, banks are going to look at predictability, consistency, and confidence in the financial structure of your business. So in this briefing, that's exactly what we're going to walk through. How do banks actually work? What is their, how do they measure confidence as far as, hey, we're willing to lend this company money? And how do companies quietly, slowly lose that confidence that their banks had in them? When you first open up a bank account, especially if it's with a smaller bank, the banker's excited. They say they love supporting the community and they love supporting small business and they're super pumped for you. But then over time, you might hear from them less. And before you know it, you are in need of cash or working capital or debt, and the bank is not there for you. So you might be thinking, well, I don't really need any goodwill with banks right now. But here's the thing. If you ever want to sell your business, the buyer will more than likely be using debt. And the bank then has to have confidence that this business could continue on without you as the owner and continue to produce the cash flow that it historically has. So that way the buyer can pay the debt and they do not default on the loan. Or at some point, every single business will need access to a line of credit. I don't care what your business is. At some point, you will probably need to draw on a line of credit, whether it was just like a funky season, funky month, or you had a couple big expenditures and you needed to draw on the line of credit, whatever it might be. Here's the thing about any sort of debt, any sort of line of credit. It's a lot easier to get it when you don't actually need it. And it's a lot easier to get a bigger one when you don't actually need it. But if you're not doing things the right way, it's going to be a lot more difficult to actually secure that line of credit. Or maybe you actually want to grow through acquisition, or maybe you want to buy the building that you're in, or you want to buy your own building, the forever building, where you can build your training center and you can have the entire office and you can have a nice warehouse and do all the things that you dream of. The banks are going to look back and they're going to uncover every single thing that's going on in your business. So what is actually going on when most owners assume that growth strengthens their banking relationship? Like I said at the beginning, if revenue is increasing, technicians are being hired, trucks are being added, it feels like progress. From the outside looking in, you probably hear it from your friends and family and neighbors, like, wow, we see your trucks more and more, and I hear how many people you're hiring, and all this thing is great. But the internal narrative is usually something like this. And this is what we're telling ourselves. The bank sees how much we've grown. They're going to love us. They know we're expanding. They know the business is doing well. They see all the revenue. But banks don't actually evaluate growth as their number one factor. What are they looking at? They're looking at the opposite side of that. They are looking at risk. And risk is determined by the bank, by the underwriters at the bank, by people that they probably don't even know the name of the business. They don't even know what your trucks look like. They don't know the stories that you're telling and how much you've grown. All they care about is how likely is this company, how likely are they able to pay us back if we actually loaned them money? And that's really all they are going to look at. Will this business reliably generate enough cash, reliably, the key word, to repay the money we lend it? Again, they are looking at risk. Yes, they make money by lending, but they only stay in business if they're lending it to people who can pay them back. So Everything they evaluate is going to flow from that question. Will this business reliably generate enough cash to repay the money we lend it? What are they going to look at? They're going to look at consistency of gross margins. So how predictable is this business's profitability? How predictable, are their gross margins, which means are they managing labor? Are they managing material? Are they pricing properly in order to have enough excess cash flow to pay us back if we lend them money? What is the stability of cash flow? So this also goes into then the balance sheet. So many times you've probably heard it before. Your bookkeeper accountant says, man, you had a great year. Look at all the profit. And then you go look at your bank account and there's not a lot of money in the bank. That's because there's a lot more things that go on in a business to determine cash flow compared to profitability. So that's what they're going to look at. They're going to look at how much money are you taking out of the business. They're going to look at all the other debt service that you have. How many vehicles do you have? What's the debt on those vehicles? What other, how do you treat your credit cards? And the overall debt levels of the business. Again, those things do not hit your P&L. So are you managing the debt that you currently have properly? And then another thing they look at is really how good are you at creating financials for your company? What's the quality of those financial reports? How timely are those financial reports? Underwriters look at this stuff every day. And if your financials are a mess and they're never done on time, and whenever they reach out, you're like scrambling, they're going to be like, this person probably doesn't have their financial house in order. Again, that is all the bank cares about. So, you know, they might also look at just historical trends of like, oh, we saw gross profit going down and then, oh, they made a correction. So they're actually tracking their numbers and it went back up and it stayed up. Or, wow, look at how well they have paid down debt and, how attentive their management team, their owners are when it comes to identifying problems and correcting it. So remember, these are all financial controls. These have nothing to do with, the other parts of your business. And this is the only things the banks are looking for. So going back to what I said at the top, you might be thinking, I don't really care. I don't need a bank right now. I promise you at some point in your ownership journey, you will. And if you do all these things now, your life will be a lot easier, a lot less stressful. So again, what did we go over? Consistency of gross margin. So what is your gross profit month over month? Is it predictable? Is it all over the place? What type of work are you doing for those gross margins? Is it predictable? Is it a lot of new construction, which isn't as great? Or is it a lot more service work? And then how stable is your cash flow? If they see that you're already drawing on a line of credit and paying it back, drawing on a line of credit and not paying it all back, and you're just not stable in cash flow, thinking like, we're not going to lend to this business, or we're not going to lend to the buyer of this business, and this business isn't sellable. Again, because they do not care about all the work you've put in, all the blood, sweat, tears, sleepless nights, stress, anxiety, 80-hour weeks, all that kind of stuff. What else they're going to look at? Like we said, debt levels, management and timeliness of your financial reporting, and then your ability to identify and correct problems historically. So this is where I see so many businesses in that, call it $5 to $8 million range, run into trouble. And even before that as well, even like the $2 to $5 million range as well, because that's when we really start to scale up and when growth starts to really kind of take it to the next level. The first couple million, you only need a couple people in the office and you can kind of control the speed at what you hire. But eventually you kind of need all the things, and you have to determine, when do we need the service manager? When do we need the install manager? When do we need the install coordinator? When do we need to bring another dispatcher or a call center manager? You're adding trucks, you're adding technicians, you're adding office staff. Your marketing spend is kind of all over the place. You've probably thought or have done and changed marketing companies several times. And on the outside looking in, it could look great and it can feel exciting, like, wow, we're really doing it. But again, growth sometimes can make the banks lose confidence. So let's not just focus on growth for growth's sake. Let's focus on the financial systems underneath the business and making sure that's foundationally stable, because sometimes those do not grow as fast as the business does. And we run into this this cash flow gap, to be honest. So what are they going to, what is the bank going to think about all this? They're going to think this business is actually more risky than it was when it was smaller. they might start doing things that you don't even notice, right? So instead of thinking, oh, I can go get a line of credit, or well, when I'm ready to buy a building, we're good to go. Just using that example. So a little bit of a tangent, but say right now your rent is, I don't know, $3,000 a month, but you want to go move into the forever building that's 2 or 3 times the size. And with the current interest rates, your mortgage might be 12 grand a month. The bank's going to look at this and be like, wow, they say they can afford it. They say it's only another $9,000, but that another $9,000 is 100 grand a year. And if your business isn't predictable and you miss a couple of those payments, the bank is not going to be happy. So what I don't want to happen is for you to not think any of this stuff's important because of your continued revenue growth. Yes, revenue growth is great, but as you know, we talk about this on the show all the time. First, we need profitability. First, we need consistent positive cash flow before anything else. Otherwise, more revenue is not going to solve your problem. So here's the thing that you might not realize. Banks aren't going to just randomly call you and say, Paul, we're losing a little bit of confidence in what you're doing. Is everything okay over there? Right? Usually it's someone in the back end, the underwriters, people, all the risk analysts, even now probably some AI. But you might notice that it takes longer to get a credit line increase, or the last 2 times you requested one, it got denied, or it's taking them longer to decide, can we give them a loan on these vehicles? They might also be asking for more financial reporting than they've ever asked before. And it's like, hey, normally I just send this over, and now all of a sudden they want all this other stuff. That's them telling you, we don't trust you as much. Or maybe the loan term rates are tighter, or your interest rates are higher. It can seem counterintuitive that, if they don't think you can afford it, then they're going to raise your rates even more. But that's how they mitigate the risk. That's how they're saying, well, we might as well get our interest while we can in case they aren't able to pay this at some point. So sometimes it's counterintuitive thinking where now they're making it harder to make your monthly payments. Again, it can be confusing from the owner's standpoint because you're like, well, we keep growing. And like you gave us, these terms back when we were a new business doing less than $1 million a year. And it all comes back to risk. When you're, you and somebody else, you and 2 people, that business actually isn't very risky from the bank's standpoint. 1, because they're not going to loan you under stuff, but 2, there are a lot less variables, a lot less moving parts in your business. And they can see that, wow, he's out there producing solid revenue and he's a good client, da, 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 da. But as you continue to scale, if you're just growing the revenue, like we said, and your debt management isn't good, your financial reporting is not good, your gross margins aren't good, that's when things become unpredictable. And when things become unpredictable, banks do not like that. Banks want to be boring. They want to have predictable streams of, the money they borrow, i.e. the deposits that's in their bank. And then they want to have a predictable stream of income, i.e. the money they're lending back out. And the way they respond to this risk is by tightening access to capital. And you might not know it's happening. So as we start to wrap this up, when bank confidence weakens, several things happen. Like I said, first, like I just mentioned, access to capital tightens. It's going to be harder to expand. It's going to be harder to go get the fleet of vehicles. It's going to be harder to move into the building. It's going to be harder to have working capital where it's like, hey, we just need to float this money for a little bit until we get paid. And then we can, then we're kind of off and running. Because the cash swings become harder to smooth out too, as you're scaling. And sometimes, the slow season or the shoulder season goes too long, and then we need more capital and we don't have it. Second, like I said, counterintuitive, but borrowing becomes more expensive. Interest rates rise, and there's less and less flexibility that they're willing to give you. Again, I know it feels counterintuitive that, if it's already hard to make payments, why are they going to raise my rates? Or if we're, doing so much more revenue, why are they raising rates? And again, it comes back to that risk. And then lastly, what really ultimately happens is then we start to get a little bit more defensive instead of actually being strategic. And then when we're defensive instead of strategic, sometimes things that aren't great happens. Growth slows. We start we start cutting marketing. And I've done episodes on this before of why you can't cut your way to profitability. Stress goes up and nothing good comes of it. So as we wrap all this up, like we do every boardroom briefing, what does the disciplined operator do? What does a disciplined operator do? They understand that bank relationships are built on predictability. They don't care that you took them out to play golf. They don't care that you see them at the chamber event. They don't care that you meet for coffee or meet for breakfast or you meet for lunch. They don't care any of that, because at the end of the day, the person you're talking to, they're a salesperson. That banker, their job is to sell. Their job is to sell to their ideal client, and you might not be their ideal client anymore because of the issues that are happening in your business. So what does the disciplined operator do? They maintain clarity around their financial health. They have stable gross margins. It is predictable. If we do X amount of revenue, our gross profit will be this, and our net profit will be this, and our cash flow will be this. They have, then, second thing, consistent cash generation. They know very, within, a small margin of error, what their cash generation will look like. They also, this is the third thing, super important, that we've talked about before, but their overhead scales appropriately with the revenue. That is what a disciplined operator does. The reason we call it disciplined, because it's really hard to do. It's really hard to kind of slow down to speed up. There's the old saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That is 100% accurate when it comes to overhead, because many times we grow overhead for our future business. However, if we don't map it out correctly and do our forecasting and projecting, and it's not timed properly, we might not ever have a future business because we've shot ourselves in the foot and we do not have cash to continue to operate. And then lastly, what does the disciplined operator do? They have accurate and timely financial reporting. Their numbers are accurate. They're done on time. Their books are clean. They've got a good chart of accounts, which means they have a good bookkeeper. They probably have a good CPA, and they've got some sort of CFO role in place where they can navigate all those things. So that way they have accurate financial reporting. It's timely reporting. Their chart of accounts are dialed in, and a banker can then take that confidently to the underwriter and say, check out these financial statements. These guys know what they're doing. And then the underwriter can say, yep, they sure do, because I never see books this clean, this accurate, and this timely. So when all of those are present, when the disciplined operator shows up with stable margins, consistent cash generation, overhead that is scaling consistently and appropriately with the revenue, and then their financial reports are accurate and on time, banks are going to become much more supportive partners. Going back to what they said when you first opened your bank account, oh, we love supporting small business. We love when businesses, are operating in our backyard and all those things. They're actually willing to then stand behind that when the disciplined operator shows up. And that way you can scale with confidence. Credit expands, decisions move faster, opportunities become easier. If you ever want to sell your business, it's a piece of cake. If you ever want to go buy a building, it's a piece of cake, because you've built all of this up over time with the bank, and everybody knows what you're doing, how you're doing it, and they are confident in the risk associated with that. So if your business is growing but cash feels inconsistent, I encourage you to step back and evaluate the predictability of your financial structure. Again, banks don't care about your effort. They don't care about all the work you've put in. They don't care that you've been doing this for 10 years. They don't care about any of that. They do not lend against effort. They lend against confidence in your numbers and to ensure the risk is on par with what they're trying to lend out to you. The more predictable your margins, your reporting, your cash flow become, the stronger your banking relationship will be. Lastly, if this conversation did resonate with you, head on over to my website, thebluecollaradvisors.com. You can learn more about how we work with owners. You can book a call. You can download our pricing calculator. And there are other resources out there. All the show notes from our podcast are out there. But one thing left to say, this podcast exists to create clarity around the financial health of your business. And if this helped provide that clarity, you're exactly where you need to be. And I'll see you next time in the next boardroom briefing.